research that helps inform, policy change, and also technical assistance. So the Corridor Development Initiative is one of our technical assistance offerings that we've been doing for about 10 years in the Chicago area, that essentially tries to flip the development process on its head and said, like, instead of kind of going through a traditional development process where developers come and say, hey, this is what I think your community should have, and give us some feedback, that what if we started with talking to residents and stakeholders and people who use that space every day, and bringing them into a collaborative exercise about visioning what could happen in a particular block and corner in their neighborhood, and how can we use this proactive engagement to get to better design outcomes, to get to better development outcomes, and hopefully to get to more equitable development at the end of the day. So that's kind of the heart and the purpose behind why we do this. Next slide, please. So part of this, the CDI, which is what we're calling it, Corridor Development Initiative, is under our equitable transit-oriented development work. I won't talk a lot about that, but really some of the priorities that we try to do when we're looking at these sites is thinking about where are they in relation to transit? How are we supporting, utilizing areas around transit to the best and highest of use? And how do we use the assets around transit of connectivity, of lower carbon emissions, of all these things that are great about walkable spaces to our advantage in all types of communities. And the equitable side of that is, balancing thoughtful and meaningful community engagement. How could these projects also be, in some cases, a template for really process change around how we do development? Go to the next slide. Also, the opportunities, Ashley and Howard, we're going to dig much more deeper into that. But if you're somewhat familiar with the areas on Howard Street, right at Ashland, across the street from a huge park, it's currently being used as a community garden. Next slide. This is an aerial shot of the development. So it's a really huge site. So it's a lot of opportunity for people to be creative about what can go there. We also try to prioritize working sites that are publicly owned, because usually large-scale publicly owned sites has some sort of, should or can have some sort of public input process before the disposition happens. So our process is that we try to be proactive about scoping out opportunities with the city, county, and we worked with the land bank last year that are around transit that have kind of all these criteria that we look at, and how do we bring this proactive planning process to a site that can help influence the request for proposals, the disposition process at the end. So we do not want to bring people together, for planning just for the sake of planning. We try to find sites that have some potential for movement, that the city is willing to put some time and effort into, getting out there in front of developers, so that people can actually come together in a planning process, hopefully see their ideas take shape and get incorporated into a request for proposals, and then actually within a couple of years see that manifest in a real development in their neighborhood. Next slide. So brief overview, we do this through a series of workshops. So 2020 is a year of innovation, and I guess I'll just say that. So in a typical situation, we would do this over a month's time with 3 workshops where we would pack up to 150 people in the room and, do a series of different interactions, small groups, whatever. We've had to, to some degree, throw that out the window and get really creative and kind of recreate our process and balance, how do we engage people in a meaningful way through a virtual process, but still offer, hopefully, some tactical in-person opportunities to help people really feel connected to the visioning portion of this exercise. Next slide. So we're still following the basic format. It'll just shift a little bit. We'll have the first meeting, which will really be just setting the stage, helping really just level set. Part of it is sharing information. Part of it is helping people understand the site, the limitations of the site, the context of the neighborhood. So things like what's happened, what are the planned investments in the neighborhoods, what are the percentage of market housing versus affordable housing, just giving people some background and content. Normally we would probably do this in a lot more detail in person, but one other thing that we're doing, and we have like a bunch of handouts and a bunch of visuals, which we can't do as well on Zoom. So one of the things that we're doing is we're doing like 3-minute videos that are featuring different voices from the development community to kind of explain like, what is affordable housing? What is the development process? Like, how do you go from, if you remember Schoolhouse Rock, like how a bill becomes a law, like how a vacant lot becomes a building. Like these types of just primer videos that we'll be sharing prior to the kickoff, just to help people in very plain, accessible language get their heads around like development process and terms, and create some kind of baseline understanding for these conversations. We also spend a lot of time talking about what the community needs and what they desire, what their values are. We use keypad polling and other supports to help people be able to participate. I know small groups conversations as well as large group conversations, but just giving people multiple ways to engage in the conversation. Meeting 2 is a block exercise, which is a design charade, which is what you guys are going to be helping us with, which we're so excited and grateful about. And typically, you know, in a regular setting, we would just have a big room and break people into small groups and they get to work with designers and development finance folks. So that will be a little bit different, and we'll talk about that later. And then the last meeting, we take about 2 weeks in between so that we can synthesize all the feedback that we get from the small group and the design charrettes, and we put that into scenarios. So people can actually see their work, usually in the terms of some sort of rendering that's based on the design that they've talked through and tried to work through in their small group. And we also do like a brief feasibility statement. So we run some numbers to actually give people an idea of what a development like this would cost. And then we pull out usually about 3 or 4 representative scenarios that come from the overall work. And we talk that through. We invite experts to come and just really talk through like, how can we get from concept to visualization? And then we do some consensus voting to kind of see what are the main principles that people can agree on throughout, these series of conversations that we've had. And then that gets all wrapped up into a lovely report, which goes to the city, by which they can help fashion the RFP. Next slide. Sorry. And these are just some slides of the process when we've done it in person. The last one we did was with Cook County Land Bank at the old Washington Park Bank building at 63rd and Cottage Grove. This is a typical small working group meeting. You can go to the next slide. Building block. So this is going to be really interesting because before we blow up these base maps, we have physical blocks, that were representative of different sizes of square footage, and they were different colors. So you'd be able to have a color-coded block that you can build up like height on a building or green space or parking or commercial space or housing. So that's part of what we're going to need to refigure out how we do that in a way that's safe and in a virtual setting as well. Next slide. And then the final meeting is typically the developer panel, where we're really interrogating some of the main themes that came out of the scenarios and talking about how do we kind of move from concept to reality. And I will mention, I forgot to mention, we work with the Chicago Department of Health, which is something new that we've tried last year, was bringing in more of a health conversation, healthy design conversation. So looking at community level data to understand what the health concerns are, and how some of those could be achieved through thinking about how we design the building, thinking about what goes in the building, all of that. So there's conversation about that as part of the design context too. Next slide. Okay, I will kick it over to Debbie to talk about our strategy for community participation.
Hi, so Kendra mentioned a little bit about how we're rethinking about this, given that there are significant changes for COVID, and making sure that we prioritize everyone's health and safety during this whole process. So the first thing is we are trying to establish this advisory council so we've already met twice, and it's made up of local stakeholders from the community who act as connectors for this project at large. So we've engaged with some local schools, some nonprofits in the area, service providers, etc. So we already have that. We have 2 meetings already. We're going to have another meeting right before the launch, so that we can continue to promote this and engage locally. So what we're trying to also do is have a presence virtually through social media and online and the website. And so City Open and our end will also have additional promotions so that it's easy for people to hop online, scan a QR code, for example, and then get more information. The other piece is the interactive signs even at the site itself. So we've heard from the community members that there are the sites themselves on like the fencing could be vandalized. And so we're just trying to more creatively think through how to inform people about the CDI process so that they can continue to engage, whether that's linking to a website, filling out a survey, or doing an SMS. We're just trying to be very cognizant of the needs of the community and how to best reach them, and making sure that things are in language that are appropriate for the very diverse Rogers Park. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the design workshops and how we're trying to engage the CDI overall. So Kendra did mention a few informational videos that we're going to introduce. It will be a series of probably 8 to 10 videos where people will talk, professionals will talk about affordable housing, about development financing tools. We'll be talking about how development even works. And then all of these will be available also on the website and on YouTube so that people can continue to learn more about this before and during the process. So then we're also going to have these meetings, the first and the third meeting that will be on Zoom and broadcast through social media, whether that's on YouTube or Facebook Live, so that there's more people who can continue to engage with it beyond hopping on a Zoom call. And then we're also thinking about surveys. We are working with the Alderman's office to ensure that there's going to be texting so that people can, if they don't have internet access, for example, then they can at least text a message via phone or engage in other ways in surveys, whether that's paper surveys or online surveys as well. So the last thing is the design workshops. So we're thinking of creating that in 3 separate different ways. One is to have virtual design sessions. So whether that's through Zoom and then breaking it into small groups so that people will be paired with designers and architects who could use SketchUp or other mock-up drawing tools so that people can suggest their ideas and then it gets translated virtually on some platform. So we're working on that. In addition, we're trying to have in-person outdoor sessions where people will still be masked but spatially distant so that we can do our regular traditional in-person charrette designs. And we're hoping to have that capped at 10 people max on that Saturday, the 10th. So that's another example of how we're trying to engage in the traditional format in a different way. And then the last thing we're trying to do is create something all new altogether. So if people don't have internet access, for example, or they don't want to meet in person, maybe they're a vulnerable age or have underlying conditions or anything else. Maybe another way is just to have people kind of do this activity at home and maybe not necessarily paired with a professional, quote unquote, but they themselves can be urban planner. Anyone can be an urban planner. So we're thinking of creating a base map for people, and then whether that's them picking it up at an alderman's office or at a grocery store or some other place, or even us mailing it. Once they get that base map at home, they can build over it, whether that's like paper blocks or Legos or anything that they can find at home, so that they can also build with a density, with height, with like how much space they want for green space or residential or commercial. They can also do that at home. And so we're trying to create a toolkit with your help to ensure that people actually have a variety of ways that people can engage. And then this way, we're trying to hope that people actually post their visuals through social media. We haven't figured out the hashtag yet, but it's just another way for people to be more active in this space. Next slide. Yeah, okay, so I talked a little bit about the 3 different ways. The first meeting will be virtual on Zoom and then broadcast live on October 1st at 6 o'clock to 7:30. And then there will be a series of design sessions. The in-person or the virtual one is going to be through Zoom during a morning session and evening session on October 8th, which is a week after the session one. And then October 10th, which is a Saturday, we are doing a number of sessions throughout the day, capped at 10 people max outside, either at the park or on site. We will soon determine those details. And then October 14th will also be another Zoom meeting, which is also coincides with one of the city open dates. And then lastly, the last session will be the third session on October 29th in the evening, also on Zoom, also broadcast live on some social media site. So that is mostly it. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. And then here's our contact information if you wanted to reach out to us. You can also tweet at us if you want to learn more.
But we'll be here with you for the next several weeks.
Yeah, that's great that you're going to be part of this group for questions. I just want to open it quickly for a few clarifying questions that the group may have. I do have just a quick one. Like, how did you decide Rogers Park, Howard Street? How does MPC decide which is the site for a CDI exercise?
Yeah, so you know, typically we try to prioritize sites around transit stations, and like the last CDIs, we've tried to think about like how do we do more in underutilized areas near transit, which is how we started working on Woodlawn. Sometimes we're really strategic, and sometimes opportunities come to us. And I think this is a situation where an opportunity came to us, where the alderman's office, where they were getting unsolicited proposals from developers for this site that they weren't particularly happy with. And Torrance can tell the story probably much better than I can. And they weren't happy with the proposals. They weren't happy with the community engagement that didn't happen around the visualizations of what the site could be. And Alderman, and some of these proposals had gotten all the way to applying for tax credits with DOH. And DOH, our former colleague Marisa, who is now the commissioner, was like, oh, you want to talk to NBC? They have a process that might help you. And so they reached out to us, and we were super excited to think about it, because we've also been looking at doing work at the 95th Street Red Line Station. So we thought, oh my gosh, this would give us the opportunity to do like both ends of the red line in very different contexts. So we were super excited to be able to work again with Alderman Hatton, who is just delightful.
Yeah, to add to that, I'm really happy we were able to get NPC on board for this. Our community, especially in the north of Howard area, and when we work on this together, north of Howard area is one of our more challenging areas, but it's one of our most diverse and most community-driven parts of our ward. And when development started coming in within our first 6 months in office, there was a lot of hesitancy, concern from our constituents, and we felt that, and we were very frustrated because we didn't want to do the same thing the previous alderman did, and we wanted to do more proactive planning than reactive planning, and we saw that NPC is a great tool and a great organization in getting that, making sure that does occur. So I want to thank NPC specifically for that.
Cool. Anyone else? Burning questions? I mean, the team, MPC, Debbie, Kendra are going to be here with us. Torrance, thank you so much for those insights, additional insights. Who owns the property? Lisa DeKira.
Yeah, it's owned by the city.
City owned. It's 2 city-owned vacant lots, essentially.
And we're going to announce this after the breakout groups, but Torrance has kindly volunteered on September 13th. We'll send a newsletter sign up for this to meet us for a walking tour, socially distanced. So if anyone hasn't been up to the site, you can take a look, and we'll probably go to get some Soul Cafe takeout.
Cool. Was there not questions to City on vacant lots? Perfect, thank you. Oh, some interesting questions here. How do residents feel about the community garden as it exists?
They love it. I could speak to that. We have many residents who are coming from other countries within our neighborhood, specifically in that part of the ward, and they work with our nonprofit, specifically Howard Area Community Center, and the garden has a how can I put this? A feel of home for them in their own country. So the garden has been very much utilized and loved by that community, by the community in that part of our work.
Cool.
And then Mark, just quickly wanted to ask about, does MPC have the dimensions of the blocks you used in the past CDI studies?
Well, I guess is the question, do we have the dimensions or do we have the actual blocks? Because we have both. I don't think we're going to be able to use the physical blocks because that's not going to be safe, which is why we need you guys' creative thinking.
We'll get to that, but I feel like the question is like, is there any reference materials that we can just get access to from your previous?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So even I also want to note that this is a strange piece of parcel. So we have like rectangular blocks and square blocks, but there's no trapezoid. So we might have to be a little bit creative of how to match those with the existing site.
What are the others we should be exploring? That question, I'm not sure. Mark, I don't want to paraphrase you.
I think it's about the blocks. Are there other mediums for like the spatial physical blocks we should be studying?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get to more of that.
We're going to use a typical block.
I know what group Mark's going to be in.
I know, me too.
And then Lisa asked about what part of this should be RFP'd. Is it the whole thing, Kendra? Is it part of it?
Full thing. It's the full thing.
Whole thing. Okay. Great.
Excellent. Okay. I just want to go through a couple of resources. You have access to all this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Just want to make sure I explain what the slides mean. So for City Open purposes, we're only going to focus in this, like the meeting 2 part, which is the block exercise that Kendra and Debbie already explained. And the way this intersects, and then sorry, I'm like a diagram junkie, so I just like seeing things like next to each other. This is like what we typically would do in City Open. We'll have 6 workshops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that are spread out over 2-3 months, usually 3 months. So what CDI community meetings are just concentrated in the month of October. So there's a site visit that Elle mentioned. It's going to be optional. I think it's going to be great that you all get to see the site in person and walk around and just get the feeling of it. But most of our time is going to be meeting here during these dates. 3 in September, which is great. This is one where we get to figure out how we're going to engage folks at the beginning of October. So it's not a lot of time, but still like, generous 4 weeks. So we can figure out really quickly how we want to work towards this. And then, after the engagements through the month of October, we are going to spend some time most likely documenting and like helping, to pass the insights and the things that we documented from this engagement to the MPC team and the CDI. And what I want to say is like, people are also welcome, is this correct, to join some of these public meetings, right? That one is happening on the 10th. This is going to be all us kind of coming together to design all the orange ones. But then also, if you are interested in your calendars, you can reference the hours to the slides that Debbie showed and shared. You're more than welcome to also join those meetings. So I just wanted to put like one visual where you understand there's like 2 parallel processes. One is giving us a good month for preparing into the engagement that is happening in the 2nd week of October. I'm just going to give you a virtual tour. This is the parcel that in the Hello Howard Community Garden, just kind of like a zoom in. It's such an interesting kind of weird geometry. This is the station. It says Howard Street, the arrival. It's just such I've never been, so I'm just still processing a lot of what I've observed. It's a very beautiful street section. And the the density of buildings, etc. This is like the corner across the street. This is my husband and my dog like being photographed. But I just wanted to get like the feeling of like the urban fabric. This is across the street from the garden. And this is a little bit of the landscape, the streetscape that the garden has. So we'll be joining, and this is the view from the back. So you see there are two parcels, they're divided by a fence, but like, I think it functions as one garden. And there are a couple of, there's a very intense like series of beds in one of the parcels. The other one feels more organic or in progress. What is a charade? I feel like there was a lot of explanation around this, but like it's basically the idea generator and it's a spatial kind of component to it. What we want to do today, and it's already 7:02, so we're gonna spend at least like 20 minutes in our breakout groups. We want to spend time brainstorming and also documenting at the same time. One of the challenges that we have found through like Zoom world is that we talk a lot, but we don't document. So we're going to try to do the same. We're going to try to do both at the same time. And the way that we're going to break out is through these different topics, right? Like the virtual, what is a virtual engagement? What is an outdoor in-person? And what could like remote DIY look like? And we're just going to go out of this prompt about how would you ask community members about activating this space. Let's not talk about development. We'll just kind of talk about ideas on how to address either virtual, outdoor, in-person, and remote DIY. So we want these breakouts to self-organize. You all have, we have kind of engaged a couple of facilitators, but it's very much, self-organization mode, where you spend like time designing who's going to be facilitator, who's going to be the documenter, who's going to report out. What we want the brainstorming to focus is on ideas. Like, what are the ideas? What are the considerations, especially for the in-person one, for safety, and public safety and COVID requirements, and like discussion. And then while you talk, your documenter, and I mean everyone else, should be looking into the Google Slides that are about next. So if you can document on the left, like describe the idea, just like put the idea down. How would that work? Just give us one line of like, how would that work? And then the second slide is just copying and pasting images, from references, examples, things that you can bring back to the group conversation. Does that sound good? Does that make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down? I don't understand. Okay.
Only thing is, people have not joined their breakout groups, so I cannot sort you.
Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do, I'm trying to pull this one.
They're coming in now, I see them.
Oh, good. I don't know why it's not letting me show that. That's weird. Oh, there it is. Okay, everyone, we're seeing here all the participants. It is in the page, it's in page 3 of our agenda. So if you want to be part of the virtual, put your name up here. If you want to be part of the in-person discussion, put your name there. If you want to,
if you don't want to be in any of them, I'll be hanging out in the coffee room in the middle, making friends.
So we'll give you a couple of minutes to put your name in one of this.
Can I
just a note, if you want to switch rooms, just come to the middle and I will resort you.
Oh, cool.
I'm gonna be in the in-person outdoor just because I just like making stuff.
Okay.
You can just put me in that one.
Can I just say one additional thing? Particularly for the in-person and the virtual groups, I think one of the things that we'll need to think about, typically when we do this, a big part of this is not just the design, but being actually being able to cost it out. So typically when we do this, the blocks represent square footages and different usage, which then, we can have our finance team kind of figure out what that is and put a price around it. So we'll have to figure out how do we kind of compensate for understanding like what are the different uses and what are potential square footages. And we can talk about probably limitations and stuff in another meeting, but I just wanted to throw that out there. For the DIY kits, I don't know if that's really a feasible thing for us to do. We're really more interested in getting people's ideas and having them post them to really generate excitement and different thoughts and stuff.
Yeah, that's a really great consideration.
Torrance, do you know which group you would like to join?
I think for me, I'm trying to think what best I could help out in. I think
I actually, virtual or DIY doesn't have an NPC person right now, or Rogers Park, Torrance and Debbie. That's helpful.
InPerson is in the remote DIY. InPerson is Kendra, and then the virtual is me.
Okay, great.
Okay, does everyone have a group?
Lisa, do you hear?
Sorry, I had to step away. Put me wherever.
All right, sounds good. Juan? Any
Yes,
choice? Oh, Juan
yeah,
chose virtual. I saw you.
yeah,
Joe chose in person. We're almost there. Yay. Al, Walker, and Emma. That's all. The only ones I'm missing. Al and Emma, any choice? I will just sort you. And I
Emma
will open
said
the rooms.
virtual. Okay, cool. See you in like
I'm gonna open them and then I'll come back at 7:25.
okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have fun, guys.
Thanks. In person. It is too short.
Yeah, that was.
Sorry.
Conversations cut short.
Ow.
Go away. I'm just trying to get people to their lives.
Okay.
I can leave this open. You guys can work in this Zoom all night if you want.
Yeah, so I think, we can't just go around, but like if you like your group, I think our group was just getting into it. Definitely like the spacer of 2 weeks, every 2 weeks is given us an opportunity to meet in between. So if you are excited about the conversation that you started to hear, just say yes, and we'll pull you into a smaller breakout that it's an hour long. So, but now you know the questions and the kind of background info to like bring and have more generative conversation.
Yeah, one advice is I've led breakout groups for City Open before is in the weeks between, I'm happy to set up like an open Zoom with breakout groups. And if someone could mute, I'm happy to set that up and then you guys can meet for like 30 minutes. So let me know.
Cool. Do we just want to do like a quick just big ideas or like some of the concepts or some of the key stuff?
How about we start with virtual? Anybody?
Okay. Yeah, so for virtual, sorry, I'm trying to put it on the slides. I'm not sure, but the notes are on the what's it called? On the doc. So one of the things that we were talking about is, well, the question is like, how are we going to? We have to take into consideration like the digital divide and the types of folks that are will be left out from these virtual and online platforms that will be having these meetings. So one of the things that we talked about was what are alternatives, right, to having this in-person charrettes, right? We want to do online virtual ones. And so we talked about SketchUp, right, as it's able to incorporate, it's difficult, although it's difficult to incorporate smoothly because it's a large software and program. It will allow folks to visually see the type of buildings that are being built or the type of design, for that matter. But one thing that we mentioned that might be helpful would be when you're using SketchUp is having kind of like blocks or very like pre-made already types of designs so that we're not building from the ground up. So that's something that it was suggested. Another program or software folks are talking about was, I believe it's called Mural, if I'm not mistaken. But that kind of goes into that started kind of leading into the issue of, okay, so 2D versus 3D, right? So who would benefit more from that, or who will actually be able to understand it better? Someone suggested also that maybe like kind of drawing, folks can draw it on their own, so they can kind of like, you know, they have like an image of like the site, and so they can kind of make a quick sketch of what they would like to see or what they suggest, and they could kind of just like, you know, show it to folks on the Zoom. And so folks could do it that way, or folks can maybe use a collage, have like some type of like a collage going on, and, you know, kind of similarly to having the pre-made sketches, they kind of just use that instead, and they say, okay, how about placing this there? Yeah, and then, yeah, those are kind of like what we got to. We also talked about, you know, folks that how folks can share this information or show this, and then kind of vote on which ones that they want to choose from. And so that's kind of like the majority we got to before we got kicked out.
Sorry.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing one. How about the in-person group?
In person, who was a reporter? Oh, Kristen.
Yes, me. Hello, everyone. So we first talked about like who exactly would be coming to these meetings in person and how we would be reaching them. So talking about different avenues like online, certain community groups like sending out newsletters and promoting things on their own social media, and then also in person with flyers where people can scan a certain QR code and sign up to come to any of these in-person meetings. I believe it's going to be 2 meetings for an hour each, or 3 meetings for an hour each across one day. We talked about how the activities are likely going to happen in the park, or it's been explored for them to happen in the park across the street. And really what we are looking to get from participants is like the guiding principles for the development. So we talked about the fun things of like COVID considerations of signing waivers and taking temperature checks. Some of the unique like outdoor interventions that have happened like in major cities across the country with like different, I think they may have actually done it in Chicago along the river with like the circles that show how far away you can be from somebody, different ways to kind of use the park, like the cement with different type of chalking exercises. And then we were talking about having like still being able to use the blocks that have previously been used in the past, because they are beneficial for actually seeing what could become, and also for the pricing that was mentioned, or the importance of being able to cost out whatever it is that you're imagining. So we talked about having like a designated block mover, or getting people the option to use gloves. And instead of, we briefly discussed like drawing out the map of the piece of land on the Ment compared to actually printing out the map. So I think we were like just getting to like, we like hit the peak of our discussion, and we were just getting into the ideas, and then we got kicked out. But those were all like the large ideas that we talked about before we could dive into them.
No worries.
And
all right.
If I missed anything, anyone can chime in.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing. All right, remote DIY. Anyone reporting out?
I can report out. So we kind of started, and feel free, anyone from the group, to interrupt, kind of talking about literally what is this? Is this an actual kit of things, kit of parts that get built? There's more a list that people kind of collect. You know, is there a targeted audience? Are there kind of multiple targeted kits? Is there collaboration with students? Oh, we're jumping around in the doc. Is there a collaboration with students at I think it was Gale Elementary School that's nearby, and there's a kit for that? or there's multiple kits for different ages, and then there's also kind of a community or adult kit. You know, does this kit include a list of terms, or start kind of integrating language and vocabulary around placemaking? The necessity for kind of a more visual approach over a written approach because of the language barrier and the number of languages that are spoken in the community. And then we kind of, similar to the previous group, we really started getting into specific ideas before we got the hook. You know, kind of different, what could this be made out of? Is it sponges? Something that's easily malleable, that doesn't need special tools or special skills to do? Is it their visual components, you know, collage or like the printout coloring books, stickers, sponges? Obviously, there would be some kind of printed site plan, colored pencils, straws, colored paper, Legos, I think is something that's been used in the past. You know, the necessity for a scale figure to be included. And then we had a few examples. One was a competition in Maine where the community provided maps, as well as Portland needs less of this and more of this. And that's kind of a really simple approach to a sort of DIY kit. And then also some photo examples of kind of, you know, in person, but there's no reason that this type of thing couldn't be created in your home with your family or whatever it may be. It doesn't need to be facilitated. So if anyone else has any input.
Cool. So what I would suggest is that, you know, these groups, I feel like they had a good dynamic, and then find a time to reconnect and like kind of keep the conversation going. I can bring my group together next week to like continue this. So if you want to be in that first group, just make, it's an in-person, just make sure your name is on the bottom of the slide.
And also, if you want to switch groups, you can indicate that as well.
Yeah.
But I think with this shortened timeline to October, we might offer that work session every week. This more formal meeting will be like this. Paula, could you also shed light on like 2 weeks from now, what we'll kind of do in that next workshop, so people know like the.
Yes. So we'll be just sharing what the tool actually looks like here. I think after the site visit will be like a really good, we'll get a better sense of like, is it a fence? It's like, now I have ideas about like maybe each gardening box becomes like a model, but it has to be small. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming with myself right now. But this session, it will be, the next session will be just bringing a prototype or like discussing a prototype, sharing a prototype, because we really need to produce really fast, like a facilitator's guide, and just kind of like the steps by the 30th. So there will be meetings in between here, but the idea is like brainstorming, prototyping, and just kind of like a draft by the 30th. So we have, you know, a week before the first like virtual engagement to have some of this materials ready.
Yeah. So we'll be sending out like next steps, but yeah, really looking for that prototype by that 16th, then working on like the order of the flow of like, how does a kit get to someone? What does the day look like? And then October is really going to just be like live. You can come help, but we'll have these groups kind of own their different engagement processes. And then November is kind of the share out. So it's like kind of fast, but I think that's also kind of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll follow up by email to the groups that you joined. We'll also be providing opportunities in the newsletter to, you know, people that maybe you know that weren't able to make it. We'll also provide that opportunity for people to join up or learn more. Paula, anything else before we close?
Nope, I think that's it.
Well, thank you for MPC for joining us, for Rogers Park, and Torrance for representing there. We'll send more information about the 13th walking tour and the smaller groups, but really happy to see everyone at our fall kickoff virtual. So thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
Bye.
all.
Thank you.
Adios.
Bye, guys.
Elle, you want to stay for a little bit?
Sure. Hi, Elle.
Hi, Oh, and bye. That was good.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
like so fast.
I know. I mean, it's always like nice to have a big intro. Maybe, you know, what could be cool? There was so many participants. That was the thing at the beginning that we went like
I
30.
know. I was like, we had
But
20. I mean, that's the biggest.
I feel like that is just, we can't skip that. So,
No, we can't. I was just excited. And there's so many
mhm.
different backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's great.
Did you stop recording?
I will stop it. Sorry. I'm getting used to